The house felt colder than usual for a New Year's Eve, though the fireplace was blazing. My younger brother and I sat on the couch, the soft glow of holiday lights reflecting off the windows. We weren't expecting guests. Our parents were out at a party. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that something, or someone, was just outside. "Can you hear that?" my brother asked. His voice was hushed, almost trembling. I strained to listen but heard nothing beyond the wind. "No," I replied, trying to sound casual. "What did it sound like?" "A tap. Like tapping glass," he said, his eyes flicking toward the window. I laughed it off, teasing him for watching too many scary movies. But as the minutes passed, I caught it too. A distinct, deliberate knock against the pane. I grabbed a flashlight and approached the window, my brother trailing behind. We peered into the darkness, the beam of light cutting through the snowy yard. Nothing. The tapping stopped. We returned to the couch, the uneasy silence broken only by the crackle of the fire. The clock ticked closer to midnight. Then a sound, a loud, sharp crack, made us both jump. One of the living room windows had split right down the middle, a jagged line running through the frosted glass. "What the—" I muttered. The wind howled louder now, as though it were angry. "I think it's mad," my brother whispered. "Mad?" I asked, turning to him. His face was pale. "Whatever's out there," he said, pointing at the cracked window. I told him he was being ridiculous, but a gnawing dread began to creep into my chest. We moved to the kitchen, where I called our parents. No answer. I tried again and again, but the call wouldn't connect. My brother stood by the back door, his small face pressed against the glass. "Don't stand there," I said, yanking him away. "What if someone's out there?" "There is someone out there," he said. I froze, and so did he. The doorknob began to rattle. It wasn't frantic. It was slow, calculated. Then it stopped. "Lock it," I whispered. "It already is." The rest of the night was a blur of fear. The clock struck midnight, but there was no celebration, no relief. I don't know when we finally fell asleep, but when we woke, the cracked window was whole again, and the snow outside was pristine, with no footprints to be found. The idea of spending New Year's Eve in New York with my friends seemed like the perfect plan. The city was alive with celebration, lights, and a crowd that seemed infinite. We rented a small Airbnb just outside Manhattan, planning to head to Times Square before midnight. We spent the day exploring the city, eating pretzels and taking selfies in front of landmarks. But by evening, something felt off. The subway ride back to our rental was unusually quiet. No trains came for several minutes, and when one finally arrived, it was empty, except for us. "New Year's, I guess," one of my friends joked. "Everyone's already partying." Back at the rental, we noticed something strange. The skyline view we'd been admiring earlier was gone. It wasn't obscured by fog or rain. It was just gone. In its place was an expanse of black, as though the city had been swallowed whole. "Is this some kind of blackout?" I asked. My friends shrugged it off, but I couldn't shake the unease. We decided to walk to a nearby bar, thinking we'd feel better surrounded by people. But the streets were deserted. Every store was closed, and the streetlights flickered, their hum unnervingly loud in the quiet. "Where is everyone?" one of my friends muttered. We reached the bar, but it too was dark. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Closed. Do not stay outside." "Let's go back," I said. The others agreed, though their unease was palpable. On our way back, we heard it. The sound of footsteps, hundreds of them. We turned a corner, expecting to see a parade or some kind of flash mob, but the street was empty. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was deafening. We ran. The moment we reached the Airbnb, the noise stopped. None of us slept that night, and when morning came, the skyline had returned. The streets were bustling again, but the bar remained dark, the sign still warning, "Do not stay outside." It started as a joke, my best friend pretending to be a psychic at our New Year's Eve party. She'd borrowed a deck of tarot cards from her aunt and was laying them out for anyone who wanted a reading. When it was my turn, she drew 3 cards. Her laughter stopped, and her hands trembled. "What is it?" I asked, leaning forward. "Nothing," she said, shuffling the cards back into the deck. But her face was pale, and her voice shook. The party went on, but she grew more distant, sitting alone in the corner, her eyes unfocused. I asked if she was okay, and she snapped at me, something she'd never done before. By midnight, she'd disappeared. I found her in the backyard, barefoot in the snow, her head tilted back as though listening to something. "What are you doing?" I shouted. She didn't respond. I grabbed her shoulder and she turned to me. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and when she spoke, her voice wasn't hers. It was deep, guttural, and wrong. "They're here," she said. "Who?" I asked, backing away. She laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Then, just as quickly, she collapsed into the snow. She didn't remember what happened when she woke up, but I did, and I still hear that voice in my dreams. New Year's Eve was supposed to be a quiet night. I was home alone for the first time in years. My parents had gone to visit family, leaving me with the promise of a call when the clock struck midnight. The plan was simple: pizza, a movie, and ringing in the new year in my pajamas. The evening began uneventfully. The air was crisp outside, snow blanketing the ground. The streetlights reflected on the icy roads, casting a soft glow through the windows. I settled onto the couch, ready to lose myself in the movie. But midway through, the power went out. At first, I wasn't too worried. Power outages weren't uncommon during snowstorms, and besides, I had candles. I lit a few and positioned them around the room, their flickering light creating shadows on the walls. I tried to focus on my phone for entertainment, but the battery was running low. It was around 9:30 when I heard the knock at the door. "Hello?" A man's voice called, muffled by the thick wooden frame. "Is anyone home? I need help." I froze, my mind racing. Who would be outside in this weather? Through the peephole, I saw him, a man in his late 40s, bundled in a thick coat, his breath visible in the freezing air. He looked harmless, but something felt off. "My car broke down," he continued. "Can I use your phone?" Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to answer. "I don't have a phone," I called back, trying to sound calm. There was a long pause. Then I heard his footsteps retreat. I exhaled, relief flooding over me. But just as I started to relax, a loud creak came from the back of the house. My stomach dropped. I had forgotten to lock the back door. Grabbing a kitchen knife, I tiptoed to the back hallway. The door was slightly ajar, snow melting on the floor. I locked it, trying to suppress the rising panic. Then I heard it, soft, deliberate footsteps upstairs. My heart thudded in my ears as I crept toward the stairs. I couldn't see anyone, but the faint sound of movement sent chills down my spine. Someone was in my house. I darted into the pantry and crouched behind a stack of cans, gripping the knife so tightly my hands ached. The footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs now. I held my breath as the pantry door swung open. "I know you're here," the man said, his voice low and cold. His boots crunched on the tiled floor as he moved through the kitchen. I peeked through a crack in the door, barely daring to breathe. He searched the cabinets, muttering under his breath. I prayed he wouldn't find me, my mind racing with escape plans. Then, just as suddenly as he had arrived, he stopped. The sound of his boots faded as he walked back toward the front of the house. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours before summoning the courage to emerge. The front door was wide open, snow blowing into the hallway. He was gone. When the police arrived, they searched the house but found no trace of him. Outside, the snow was disturbed by a mess of footprints leading to and from the back door. I never saw him again, but every New Year's Eve, I double-check every lock. I've always loved spending New Year's Eve alone. While others go out to parties, I prefer the quiet comfort of my living room. This year was no different. I had a bottle of champagne, a tray of snacks, and the TV tuned to a live countdown broadcast from Times Square. The evening passed peacefully. The lights on my small Christmas tree twinkled softly, and the occasional pop of fireworks echoed in the distance. As midnight approached, I sank into the couch, watching the festivities on TV. 10, 9, 8. The screen flickered. 7, 6, 5. It froze, the bright crowd on the screen replaced by static. I leaned forward, annoyed. "Not now," I muttered, fiddling with the remote. Suddenly my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Don't move." I froze, the phone slipping from my hand. My breath caught in my throat. The static on the TV disappeared, replaced by a live feed of my own living room. The camera angle was strange, as though it were mounted high in the corner of the room. I looked around, scanning for any sign of a device. Nothing. Another text came through. "Look behind you." I whipped around, the room empty but for the flickering lights on the tree. The only sound was the clock ticking toward midnight. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone to call for help, but the line was dead. The countdown resumed on the TV, the numbers flashing in bright red. 4 dots, 3 dots, 2. The lights went out. I was plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from the TV's eerie glow. The countdown froze at 1. A sharp knock sounded at the window, then another. The knocks grew louder, coming from every side of the house. My head spun, heart racing as I backed into a corner. When the lights flickered back on, everything was normal. The TV showed the Times Square celebration, people cheering and confetti falling. I checked my phone, no messages. To this day, I don't know who sent those texts or how they controlled my TV. But every New Year's, I can't help but glance at the corners of my room, wondering if I'm still being watched. When my mom married him, I thought he was just a quiet guy. He didn't talk much, didn't smile often, but he was polite enough. Over time, I noticed his strange habits. He'd lock the basement door every night, spending hours down there. Whenever I asked what he was doing, he'd just say, "Projects." On New Year's Eve, curiosity got the better of me. He'd gone out for a while, and my mom was asleep upstairs. The house was eerily quiet as I approached the basement door, my hand trembling as I picked the lock. The smell hit me first. It was sharp and metallic, mixed with the stinging scent of bleach. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, the dim light barely illuminating the room. Stacks of photographs lined the walls, each showing a person staring directly at the camera. Their faces were twisted in terror, their eyes wide and pleading. My stomach churned as I flipped through them, recognizing some of the faces from missing persons posters in our town. In the corner of the room stood a workbench. A knife gleamed under a single bulb, its blade stained dark. Nearby was a pile of clothes, torn, dirty, and unmistakably human. I stumbled back, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. He couldn't be. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my panic. He was home. I scrambled up the stairs, locking the door behind me. My heart raced as I darted into my room, pretending to be asleep. Minutes later, I heard his footsteps pause outside my door. The handle jiggled softly, then stopped. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He greeted me with a smile, asking if I wanted pancakes. But I couldn't look him in the eye. I never told my mom what I found, too afraid of what he might do if he knew. But every New Year's Eve, I hear the basement door creak open in the night, and I wonder how many more photographs he's adding to his collection.